Welcome into episode 4 of Awakening the Ordinary. Since you have, I'm sure, already seen the thumbnail for this video, you've probably guessed this is not the spiritual episode. That is still coming, I promise. But that's a topic that is so deeply personal and important to me that I just want to spend a little more time writing it and making sure it's the way that I want to present the message. Every week, I keep seeing new news. I keep getting these head scratching comments. I keep getting into these political argument discussions with my friends. And I think it's time for me to have my Alex Jones episode because I'm tired of them putting chemicals in the water and turning the freaking frogs gay.
Chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Serious crap.
Okay, but seriously, I am so deeply tired of these two political parties. So consider this my Festivus. This is my airing of grievances, if you will. If you are a MAGA person, you are going to love part 1 of this episode because I'm going to be really going in on Democrats, leftists, and like basically woke culture. I'm going to say some probably pretty controversial stuff, but I just want you to give me a shot. I have sound reasoning for everything that I'm going to talk about, and I just want to reassure you that I do not have an ounce of hatred in my entire body. Except for billionaires. So when I say these things, I just want you to know I'm coming from a good place, okay? I feel like the Democratic Party is at its lowest point right now, and they're just out of touch and frankly kind of weird. So hear me out. And then for my progressive friends, you get the second half, okay? Because I am going to be going in on Republicans, the MAGA movement, and the loudest and most common comment that I seem to get on every episode that I mention the orange guy, which is that they are getting exactly what they voted for and they are thrilled to death about it. So right now we have a literal criminal felon in the White House, and he has just appointed, with no vote, this oligarch billionaire to run rampant through our federal government and basically tear it down with no oversight. And nobody is losing their mind about this. I feel like screaming about it like Alex Jones screaming about demonic goblins. So here is my big request. And I don't do this. I don't plan on doing this again, at least for a long time. But I'm going to go ahead and say, if you could, I would really appreciate you clicking the like button and clicking the subscribe button and doing it preferably right now. And the reason I'm saying do it now as opposed to later is because after I talk about your preferred political party, I think there's a pretty decent chance you're not going to like me very much. And I'm kind of just hoping that you're going to forget to click unsubscribe afterwards. So just to be on the level with you, I think that'd be great. The other thing is, give me a chance. Listen through all the way because I'm going to say some things that you might think are out of left field or, you know, backwards or just out there. But I promise I'm going to try and give you decent reasoning and convince you of my viewpoint. So hear me out, give me a shot. And finally, I want to say that I truly believe that the only way our nation is going to heal and move forward is if we can get some real, genuine dialogue going on between the left and the right. If there's anything you're passionate about, If there's something really strongly agree with, strongly disagree with, or even if you just want to add some nuance to the conversation, do it below. Because I think alternative media like this podcast, podcasts in general, are going to be kind of the key to getting real dialogue going for the first time in years. So, with all that being said, let's begin. Democrats, I have one question for you. What the hell is wrong with you? Some recent polling came out that just absolutely boggled my mind. I thought I was in loony land when I saw the results. So I want to talk about that first. Firstly, just to get it out of the way, Ipsos did a poll and found a 57% unfavorable rating for the Democratic Party. This is the highest unfavorable rating since 2008 when they first started doing this kind of polling. And this is not the mind boggling poll. This is basically, to me, expected. You guys just lost probably the most important election of my lifetime in, frankly, like really embarrassing fashion. I mean, it was bad. So that brings me to the first mind boggling poll. Ipsos, in conjunction with the New York Times, polled across the board to see three things. They asked a mixture of Democrats, Republicans, and independent voters. First, what are the top 5 things you care about, politically speaking? What are your top 5 issues? Second, what do you interpret the Democratic Party top 5 issues are? And third, what do you interpret the Republicans Party's top 5 issues are? So, if you have eyes and ears, this will probably not surprise you. But here's the list of the top 5 things that people say they care about. First, the economy. Second, healthcare. Third, immigration. Fourth, taxes. And fifth, crimes. That's in order. And again, this should not be a surprise to anybody. So then they said, okay, what do you think the Republican Party cares about? And in order, they said immigration, the economy, taxes, guns, and abortion. And astute viewers may notice that that means that 3 of the top 5 issues that people think Republicans care about are also 3 of the top 5 issues that people say they care about. So, frankly, they think the Republicans are relatively in line with their own values. What do people think the Democratic Party cares about? Well, in order, they think the Democratic Party cares about abortion, LGBT policy, climate change, the state of democracy, and then finally, healthcare. So, people think that the Democratic Party cares about basically one single thing that they care about, healthcare. And they think the Democratic Party cares about it a lot less than they do because they put it fifth. So I'll get back to that in a minute. The second poll that I thought was even more striking and just really honestly boggled my mind and kind of disappointed me in a way that I thought was not possible in this day and age was McLaughlin and Associates polled Democrats and asked them, who do you want to run in the 2028 presidential election? And in that poll, they basically listed kind of all the big name Democrats that you've probably heard of. So Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, all the big names, basically. And then also, for some reason, Stephen A. Smith. Yeah, that Stephen A. Smith, the ESPN guy who talks about football and stuff. Him too. Um, so Pete Buttigieg, Mayor Pete, good guy, decent candidate. He got second place. He got 9% of the vote. The person who won first place with 35% of the vote, 35% of Democrats said they wanted Kamala Harris to run in 2028. Okay. Woo. Sorry about that. I smell burnt toast. I think I just had a stroke. I just want to remind you guys, in case you forgot, she just ran maybe the worst campaign that I have ever had the displeasure of having to watch in silent agony over the course of 100 days. She lost in a landslide, in embarrassing fashion, to a literal convicted felon. Let me repeat that for you. Kamala Harris lost to a guy in an orange jumpsuit. This guy is going to be older than Joe Biden, the guy that we kicked out for being too old. He's going to be older than him by the time this term ends. Trump was so toxic after the January 6th riots that he orchestrated that people thought he was done. People thought Republicans were done. They didn't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole. They thought the MAGA movement was over. He and his whole family were basically radioactive after that. And Kamala Harris essentially orchestrated the greatest political comeback the world has ever seen for one Donald J. Trump. Let's rewind a second. Back in 2019, the Democrats were running their primaries. They needed to figure out who could slay the mighty Donald Trump. Kamala Harris threw her hat into the ring in January of 2019 on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And she actually raised a buttload of money almost immediately. I mean, she was the only woman of color candidate who announced their run. So a lot of people wanted to get in on that. A lot of people wanted to support that. They gave her a crap load of money. And she had a single highlight over her entire campaign where she basically called Joe Biden racist and called out some of his comments from the 1970s about segregated schools and like busing students. And that was it. And then she proceeded to be incredibly unlikable. She couldn't debate. She came across as just super fake and weird. And essentially had to drop out almost immediately. I mean, she didn't even make it to Iowa, the first primary. She didn't make it to Iowa. So RIP the Kamala Harris for President campaign 2019 to 2019. Why then do Democrats want to pull off some kind of arcane necromancy and bring it back to life for 2028? After her horrible failed 2019 campaign, she became the very first DEI vice president. Whoa! I'm sorry, what? A DEI candidate? Are you kidding me? Yes, a DEI candidate. And no, I'm not racist for saying that. This brings me to my very first complaint about Democrats. They are so quick to moralize and virtue signal over the absolute stupidest things. First of all, yes, she was by definition a DEI candidate. She was literally the dictionary definition of what DEI means. Joe Biden, in the 2019 primaries that we just talked about, made a promise. He said that when he chose his vice presidential candidate, because he wanted to hold up the ideals of diversity and equality and inclusiveness, he would choose a Black woman as his running mate. He said that, and that was his stated reason for it. So, first of all, don't get mad at me for saying it. Get mad at Joe Biden for saying the quiet part out loud. That means that he himself was saying that the most important qualification for his running mate was not their skills. It was not their diplomacy, their eloquence. It wasn't how good they were going to be at the job. The most important thing to him was the color of their skin and their genitals. I mean, by definition, that means that she was a DEI hire. She was chosen for her race and her sex. You can't get mad at me about that. And secondly, you guys like DEI. I mean, that's your whole thing. Is you think it's a good thing. You think it's a good thing to promote these diversity ideals and quotas. And so why are you getting mad when people are saying Kamala Harris was a DEI candidate? It doesn't make any sense. First of all, she objectively was. And second of all, you guys supposedly think that that's okay or even a good thing. So when you get mad about it, you're kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth. On the one hand, you're saying, yes, we are okay with these quotas. We're okay with promoting diversity in this way. And on the other hand, don't ever say that anybody we actually care about is part of this program. I mean, it just seems hypocritical. And it seems like maybe you don't actually think it's that great of an idea if you get so mad about people calling it out. Here's the truth about DEI. First of all, by definition, if you are trying to fill quotas because of somebody's race or gender identity or sex, that's racist and that's sexist. And second of all, I just want to be fair here. Honestly, in practice, it really wasn't even like that. Most of the time, DEI stuff really didn't end up having that kind of a negative effect that the right kind of uses as a boogeyman, saying, unqualified people were taking jobs or whatever. I mean, I've talked about this before, corporate greed, right? And how corporations basically will do absolutely anything to maximize their profit. So, do you think for 1 second a corporation is going to do the right thing in exchange for any amount of money? No. The only reason these corporations would ever embrace this whole DEI ideology is because they think it's going to make them more money. And that's, by the way, pretty obvious with how many corporations immediately dropped all of their DEI programs the second Trump came into office. Anyway, if a corporation sees a highly qualified candidate who is, for example, a white male, they're not going to just decide to hire somebody who's going to do the job worse because they're a different, skin color or whatever. They don't do that. They want to make the most money possible. So that's what they're going to do every single time. They don't believe in anything other than the holy dollar. So to everybody freaking out about DEI stuff, saying it cost them their job or whatever, I think maybe in some niche cases, sure. And there are even some open lawsuits about it. But the vast majority of people were not even really affected by this stuff. It was basically just moral grandstanding. So I think it's important to have a nuanced discussion about things like DEI. But I guess my point about all of this was Democrats don't want to do that. They want to use it as a bludgeon, basically. And if you disagree with it, they just want to label you as racist or sexist or bigoted in some way. And I guess that brings me to my next point, which is that Democrats really embraced identity politics, to a stupid degree. And honestly, it was just a terrible, dumb strategy to begin with. I mean, when you demonize a voting bloc as large as white men, you can't be all shocked Pikachu face when white men overwhelmingly go vote for the other guy. What are you doing? It's baffling to me that you would alienate the largest voting bloc in the country when you're in the midst of fighting for their vote. You basically kind of tried to make white people feel bad for being white. That was a winning strategy. I have this, I guess, radical notion that people shouldn't feel bad for the way that they were born. I'm going to be going in on the Republicans for this too. But the fact is, the party that's supposed to be inclusive, the party that's supposed to be welcoming people and, embracing different groups, is also the party that seemingly demonized the largest group of people. It really felt like they basically tried to be inclusive by making white people like the bad guy. I can already hear you typing it. White people weren't actually demonized. It's just that they've experienced white privilege for so long that being treated fairly and equally feels like being persecuted. And to that, I just want to say that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like painting with that broad of a brush about such a massive group of people it's racist. What the idea of white privilege, the idea that everybody of some certain ethnic or racial group experiences the same things or has the same kind of life or whatever is racist. It's not reverse racism, it's just racism. Look, we can have a nuanced discussion about white privilege. I'll make a whole episode about it if you want. But basically, when it comes down to it, white privilege is sort of like the left's boogeyman version of how the right thinks about DEI stuff. It's just, it doesn't come into play that often. And sure, it may exist, but it just doesn't have that much of an effect on most people. People made a big deal about it to try and create bigger racial divides. And again, I mean, you can look at some of my past videos where I talk about how these corporations form narratives to try and drive wedges in between people because to them, everybody is the same if they're not part of the corporate class. But basically, they don't want us to come together in class solidarity or whatever. They want to try and divide us by whatever means they can. And if that means they talk about white privilege so white people feel alienated, they'll do that. And if that means they talk about DEI stuff so certain groups feel like they're being treated unfairly, they're going to do that too. That brings me to what I think is probably the last thing that I will complain about the Democrats today for. As much as they attempted to paint Republicans as the weird ones in the 2024 election, and I think most of us probably remember that kind of weird, like astroturfing campaign they ran to just call every Republican weird. It really seems like the Democrats are the ones that embrace these strange, very, very niche movements. Look, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for saying this. I know it already, but drag queen story hour? Really? I, it just seems kind of weird. I just want to re-emphasize, first of all, that I don't have any hate in my body for anybody. Okay, I have exactly zero hate for people who have different beliefs than me, look different than me, act different than me. And honestly, I think it's sad that I even have to say that, but basically that's kind of my whole point about this is that's Democrats for you. You have to couch every single criticism by making sure you reaffirm that it's not coming from a place of hatred. So again, I have no problem with drag queens. If you want to dress up and take on a new identity and whatever, that's totally fine. Almost all of my favorite superheroes do that. But the fact is, it's just kind of weird to have drag queen story hour. I mean, it's just like drag queens basically dress as like hypersexualized caricatures of women. And then you want to put that around kids? It's just strange. Like, why? What's the point? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. And the fact that people get like really, really mad over people thinking that's weird is like, I don't know, that's even weirder. Like, what are you doing? Gay pride parades where men go around basically dancing in Speedos and like waving dildos around and stuff. And if you have the gall to say you kind of feel uncomfortable around that and you don't really want your kids seeing it, then all of a sudden you're labeled as like a bigot and stuff. You get mad about people not wanting their kids around hypersexualized things. And to me, and I think to a large group of Americans, That's just kind of weird. Look, I get I'm not exactly being like eloquent about it. It's kind of hard to explain why something just, feels weird. But the fact is, there are social norms that exist, and whether or not they're fair or whatever, they're real. So when people say that they want to protect their kids from over sexualized things, when people say they want to protect their kids from basically anything, and then you get really mad about it, it makes people uncomfortable to be around you. Trump just signed an executive order where he said that trans girls, so people who were born biologically male and then transition to female, are not allowed to play in sports for girls. Basically, if you were born biologically male, you shouldn't compete with people who are born biologically female. And I just want to say, like, obviously that's stupid. It's a stupid executive order. It's executive overreach. He doesn't even like really have a right to do any of that. And honestly, it's just dumb because it affects like, I don't know, like tens of people in a country of over 300 million people. I mean, it's just dumb, right? But we know he's kind of dumb. But the fact that you guys are getting so worked up and mad about it, I mean, I don't know. I kind of agree. If you're born biologically male, it kind of seems like you would have some kind of advantage over people who are born biologically female. So, do I think the executive order is stupid and he shouldn't have done it? Yes. Do I think it's kind of weird that you guys are throwing a huge fit about it and saying it's like bigoted and stuff? Yes. I think most people are basically on the same page as me too. I think most Americans kind of see these issues as niche and like a strange hill to die on. I mean, for example, we all saw that ad like 1,000 times where Kamala Harris was talking about how she wanted to make sure that illegal immigrants who were in jail were able to get gender affirming sex change therapy. What? What are you talking about? That's got to be like one person in the US, right? I mean, I know that wasn't like her campaign message or whatever, but she said it herself. That's why it was such an effective ad campaign because you just turned her own words against her and people thought it was weird. It's weird to make such a big deal over such a niche, minor, small issue. And again, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't stand up for your beliefs. I think you should. But in my experience, most people who voted for Trump, they didn't like analyze the effect that tariffs would have on their specific industry and decided like, yeah, I'm going to do that. That's what I want. They did it basically as like a culture war thing. They did it to kind of like fight back against like wokeism and whatever. And like, yeah, I'm cringing just saying that. But to an extent, they kind of have a point. Democrats get on these like virtue signaling rants and they want to die on the hill of these niche, small, minor issues. My point is at the end of the day, is Drag Queen Story Hour more important than making sure that everybody has health care? And look, if it is to you, then okay, that's fine. But I really think you need to analyze your priorities. And I think the American people think you do too. That's what all the polling suggests. That's what the most recent election results suggest. And I guess that's what I'm suggesting right now too. I don't want you to change who you are. I don't want you to not stand up for your beliefs. I want you to fight for equal rights for everybody. It's important. I want you to hold firm to your virtues and your ideals. But at the end of the day, just maybe take a look in the mirror. Take a look and analyze and see, are you really spending your energy in the wisest places? When you take your time worrying about things like Drag Queen Story Hour or like trans kids playing sports or whatever, like, is that really more important than making sure the minimum wage gets raised or making sure universal health care is a thing? Do you care more about moral grandstanding that Kamala Harris isn't strong enough on her Gaza stances than you do about making sure that the orange guy in the matching jumpsuit doesn't make it to the White House. He just talked about how he wants to basically remove the Palestinians from Gaza and turn it into a resort town, right? Right? So all I'm saying is just pick your battles, maybe. Take a look at your priorities and really think about what matters. Okay, so I just want to stop here for a second and acknowledge yes, I did actually do a cut. I'm recording this portion a little later. That's why some of the lighting has changed, some of the stuff is moved around. So sorry, hope it doesn't interrupt your flow or anything, but yeah. All right, moving on. I want to wrap up the Democrat section with these 3 points. First of all, don't hate people because they ask reasonable questions or because they have an opinion that is different than you. Obviously, if people are expressing bigotry or racism or sexism, yeah, stand up. I mean, don't be quiet. Don't just let it happen. Fight for people who can't fight for themselves. That's good. But it feels like you've taken it too far, way too far. And reasonable people, people who aren't racist or sexist or homophobic or anything like that, are afraid of asking questions because they don't want to be canceled. And when you make it so that reasonable people feel like they can't speak out, then the only people who are going to speak out are unreasonable people, the far right extremists, the billionaire oligarchs who are going to stand on stage and give you a Roman salute and try and pretend like it just means their heart is going out to you. When you shut out reasonable people, it only leaves the alternative. Second of all, during the first Trump campaign and presidency, you freaked out about everything. I mean, literally everything. Things that were worthy of freaking out about, things that were completely unworthy of giving any kind of attention to. I mean, issues, non issues, made up issues, 2 scoops of ice cream. I mean, you guys threw fits about everything and you turned into the boy who cried wolf. So nowadays, you've used up all of your kind of political capital and goodwill over freaking out about things that most people just didn't care about. And so now, when the Republic is genuinely at risk, people don't want to listen to you. You're the boy who cried wolf. And so, moving forward, in some ways, it's almost too late. I think trust in the mainstream media is broken, and honestly, for good reason. But now you can decide how you want to approach things moving forward. Do you just want to completely lose it over every minor thing that happens? Or do you want to pick your battles? Do you want to speak out on the things that really matter in the hopes that people will listen? Finally, even if you disagree with some or even all of what I said, I think you can't possibly disagree with the fact that seemingly a very, very large number of your fellow Americans, maybe even the majority, considering the result of this last election, agree with me. So you get to decide now. Are you going to plug your ears? La, 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 la. No, it's the people who are wrong. Or are you going to do a little introspection and try and decide what part you played in the current state of political discussion, the current state of our democracy, and where our country is headed? Okay, so speaking of where our country is headed, that brings me to Republicans. Democrats, thank you for listening as I just ruthlessly lambasted you. From the bottom of my heart, I think you deserved it. I hope you take the time to choose your battles more carefully, and I hope that you can move forward with a better mindset. If you just clicked this timestamp because you didn't want to hear me go in on your party, then hey, make sure you crank the AC up too, because I don't want you to melt, Snowflake. But seriously, now that you have put up with all of that slander, sit back and relax because holy cow, the Republicans are in a much worse state than you, even. MAGA. What the hell is wrong with you? Where to even start with you guys? Seriously. I mean, I guess I will go ahead and start with what is to me personally maybe the most annoying thing that I see on a constant basis. I have gotten this comment on almost every single full-length video, short, TikTok, anything I post where I remotely am criticizing the Trump administration. I get this comment. Um, Actually, Daniel, this is exactly what we voted for. Everybody is very happy that this is happening. So please, please, Daddy Trump, just give it to us more. This is what we wanted. Yes, this is what it means to make America great again. Okay. Um, there are two things wrong with. No, actually, no. There's a lot of stuff wrong with that. First of all, what? Why do you sound like that? That is so weird. Stop. But there are two major issues with that. Before I get into that, I just want to preface this by saying just because you voted for Trump doesn't mean that you have to support everything that he does. You just don't. It's okay. You don't even have to think that you made the wrong choice if you do decide that you don't support a bunch of the stuff that he does. That's fine. You can decide that he was basically the lesser of two evils or the better alternative or however you want to couch it. I personally, I voted for Kamala Harris. It's not because I liked her. I didn't even like a lot of her policy. I did not think she was a good candidate. I thought she was one of the worst candidates that I have ever voted for in my life. So, as I approach you with these issues, I just want you to keep an open mind and understand that you're not going to lose your Republican card if you agree with me, okay? You're not going to, you know, get your MAGA hat taken away if you decide that, yeah, maybe some of the stuff he's doing isn't really what I voted for or isn't even really what I want to happen. It's okay. Just be intellectually honest with yourself and make the commitment to admit when people that you voted for, people that you may even have respected, do something wrong. The first reason that no, you did not actually vote for what he is doing is because he never even said he was going to be doing a bunch of this stuff. I mean, I followed the campaign like a hawk. I watched the news every single day. It's why my brain is pudding. And I promise you, he did not one time tell you that he wanted to turn Gaza into like a Trump resort town. He never said that. I mean, was that in the debates? Was that in between where Joe Biden said he beat Medicaid? I mean, seriously, please remind me. It was completely out of left field. You literally could not have seen that coming. If you voted for the guy planning on him coming up with the idea that for some reason Palestinians would all of a sudden be okay with leaving the Gaza Strip, even though they have fought a losing war for a year and a half and died because they don't want to leave, then uh, hey, shoot me the lottery numbers for real. I mean, if you thought that he would sign an executive order to try and end birthright citizenship, you're psychic. I have no other way of putting it to you. You get messages in your dreams telling you the future because there is no way you could have predicted that. He can't even do that. I mean, it's not legal, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get to that in a minute. Related to that first point is it's really kind of hard to know exactly what he promised because he will pretty consistently say two exactly conflicting things. I mean, he kind of has this habit of basically making a choose your own president, and then a couple of weeks later he'll say the complete opposite. So you get to basically just decide which one you think is actually true. And the other one, oh, well, that was just trolling, of course. I mean, look, you're America first, right? That's why you voted for Trump. America first, America only, America always. He's America first, so are you. That's why he hates the H-1B visa program. In 2016, he ran on the idea of eliminating it entirely because we don't need those foreign workers coming in and undermining our American workers and doing the same job for less, right? Except in 2024, all of a sudden he thought it was the greatest program in the world. And he said he wanted to literally staple work visas to foreign diplomas. Like, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me the difference. In 2016, he said what he actually thought. In 2024, he said what Elon Musk wanted him to say because he gave him $250 million. But how do you decide what you're actually voting for? I mean, are you voting for him because you hate H-1B visas, like he said in 2016? Or are you voting for him because you love H-1B visas, like he said in 2024? I mean, you can't possibly honestly say that you even know exactly what you're voting for when you are voting for him. He says contradictory things 24/7. And if you confront him on it, he'll just lie. I mean, he just will. It doesn't matter if you have a recording of it. He will say it didn't happen or you're misunderstanding him or misinterpreting him. I mean, it doesn't matter. He'll do it for everything. He is a master manipulator. That is basically why he's been such a successful politician. But here's the thing. In 2024, for the last 100 years, you are dominated by the two-party system. You are controlled by your cognitive bias. So you're automatically going to want to support whatever the big guy does because he's your big guy, right? I mean, you voted for him. For example, and this one is probably going to hit close to home for some of you. Joe Biden initially said that he was never going to pardon Hunter Biden. He promised. And so when people were polled about it, when the question came up, they said, yeah, no, of course, we hate that idea. The approval rating for pardoning Hunter Biden was in like the low teens. Fast forward to 2024, and all of a sudden, Sleepy Joe did it. He pardoned his son. And guess what? The approval rating for it went up to like 50%. Surprise, surprise. Half the people in the country who are Democrats decided that it was okay all of a sudden. And it's because their guy did it. When they thought he wouldn't do it, they didn't like it. When he suddenly did do it, they decided, okay, they like it. I mean, this is an issue that is not just limited to the Democrats. And you see it actually even more with Republicans right now because they're in power. Trump talked about pardoning the January 6th rioters, and basically, top to bottom, Republicans agreed. Yeah, pardon the rioters, don't pardon the violent ones. Pardon the people who just showed up, don't pardon the people who beat and tasered cops and gave them heart attacks. Pretty reasonable take, right? And top to bottom, they all agreed. I mean, JD Vance, a few days before the inauguration, was talking about obviously you should pardon the rioters, and just as obviously, you should not pardon the violent ones. And then all of a sudden, it got close to inauguration day, and reports are that it got really complicated and took a long time trying to like sort through who did what. So Trump basically just threw his hands in the air, said, F it, I'm just going to pardon everybody. And so for the next week, Republicans, all the way from J.D. Vance down to, junior congressmen, were basically scrambling, trying to figure out how they could explain away the fact that now they have to do a 180 and say that they're okay with it. Some of them outright just lied and said, yeah, I support this. Some of them took basically the coward's way out and decided that they just weren't going to make a comment, or they were just going to be totally non-committal. Oh, well, it's not really my job. The president can kind of do whatever he wants, right? Okay, right. The cronyism and hypocrisy would honestly be laughable if it wasn't so deeply disheartening and sad. So, okay. The second reason that you did not actually vote for all of this stuff is because a bunch of this stuff that he's doing is literally illegal. It won't be upheld. It won't actually even have happened, basically. And I want to explain because I feel like a lot of times you'll get pundits or, the mainstream media or even podcasters or whatever screaming about how this stuff is illegal. It's illegal. We got to stop it. And they really don't explain at all. I think that's kind of elitist. I think a lot of people don't really understand exactly how the US government works. And that is honestly mostly a failure of the US government itself for not educating its people enough. But I just want to explain. The government is split into three branches. You've got the judicial branch, which is basically the Supreme Court and all of the judges in the land on down. And then you've got the legislative branch, which is it's Congress. It's the House and the Senate, and they're in charge of writing laws. And then you've got the executive branch, which is the president. The legislative branch has honestly given up a lot of its power over the past couple hundred years to the executive branch. But one thing that they have not given up and cannot give up is what's called the power of the purse. The legislative branch is the branch that decides what our budget is, how much money we have to spend, on what, and how much money we're cutting from various organizations. So the president can, in some minor ways, have a little bit of power to move that money around, usually by declaring some kind of emergency and saying that he needs to move money for relief or whatever. But for the most part, the vast, vast majority of all of the funding cannot be decided by the president. It just can't. It's not allowed. And if he tries to order money to be moved around, that is illegal. It will not be upheld. He can advise the Congress on what he wants to have done, but he cannot tell them, you are going to shut down USAID. He cannot unilaterally write an executive order to, for example, defund the Department of Education. That's illegal. So if you voted for him and you voted for him to do these things that he is doing right now, that means that you have a deep misunderstanding of civics in the United States. Or you voted for him and you did not vote for him to do these things that are illegal. That's it. So I just wanted to get that out of the way because I swear every single video I make where I criticize the orange guy or I talk about how something he's doing is stupid or evil or whatever, I get a flood of people saying he's just doing what we want. But I mean, is he? Like, actually, is he doing what you really wanted before you voted for him? Did you vote for him to do things that are illegal and will not be held up long term? Did you vote for him to do things that will backfire on him politically and probably damage the Republican Party? Did you vote for him to, for example, get rid of H-1B visas because that's what he said he wanted to do before? Or did you vote for him to expand them because that's what he says he wants to do now? Either way, I don't know that you can honestly, truly say that you voted for everything that is happening right now. I don't think you can. But I want to move on because I could go on and on and on about the issues that Trump is causing. And in the coming videos, when he does even more stuff, I'll be talking about it then too. But while Trump is, in my opinion, obviously the biggest problem with the Republican Party right now, he is by far not nearly the only problem. And actually, this next point really relates well back to what I was just talking about. Because you guys have the memory of goldfish. I mean, seriously, if you are sitting back and cheering for the fact that Trump is illegally shutting down different departments and organizations, you have the memory of a goldfish. That's the nice way of saying, I think you're basically an idiot. If you think to yourself, okay, so I know this is illegal, I know that he shouldn't be doing this stuff, but honestly, who cares? Because I support it anyway. I don't like the Department of Education and I think it's wasteful, so I think it should be shut down. I don't like USAID and I think it's wasteful, so I think it should be shut down. So I don't care if what he's doing is illegal. Then you need to remember that Trump is temporary. He is only going to be president for 4 years. And even if the Republicans win the presidency again in 4 years, which is honestly statistically unlikely, they are not going to win the presidency forever. Eventually, there will be a Democratic president. And you know how Democrats are always talking about how, like, for example, ICE is a racist organization and needs to be shut down? Well, they never did it before because they can't. They cannot unilaterally decide that ICE is bad and needs to be shut down. The president cannot sign an executive order shutting ICE down. Until now, apparently. Because if Trump can shut down the Department of Education and if Trump can shut down USAID, yeah, Democrats can shut down ICE. So, however Trump uses his power now and however he abuses his power now, Democrats will be using and abusing their power. And honestly, when you complain about it, you won't have a leg to stand on because you were cheering for it when your guy did it. So, yes, if you are cheering what's happening right now, you have the memory of a goldfish. You have zero foresight. And I think you seriously need to consider if you don't want to maybe call up your representative and ask them to stop what's going on. And speaking of short term memories, you guys are so ridiculous when it comes to technocratic oligarchs. I'm old enough to remember when Mark Zuckerberg was, like an enemy of the right. He was considered this far left, crazy person who always wanted to shut down Republican ideas. And I'm old enough to remember that because I'm not 10 years old. I mean, literally, it was back in the 2016 election. People were freaking out about how Facebook was controlling the narrative and always trying to stop Republican ideas, and how Mark Zuckerberg needed to go to jail. But now, suddenly, he donates $1 million and everybody wants to kiss his ring. Like, what are you doing? He didn't give you that money. He gave Trump that money to throw a party. It wasn't even to help anybody. It doesn't help you at all. It helped his inauguration be more fancy. So why all of a sudden are you lining up to kiss Mark Zuckerberg's butt? And this goes for all of them too. Jeff Bezos, Sam Altman, all of them. They all, at various times, have spoken out about how they don't support Trump. Jeff Bezos ran the Washington Post for a long time about how awful Trump was. Sam Altman talked for years about how terrible Trump was and how nothing would make him happier than preventing him from being president. And then, of course, all of a sudden, Trump signs a deal that's going to give Sam Altman $500 billion to work with for his AI projects. And yeah, he's kissing the ring too. These tech bros are sycophants. They are nothing but leeches. They go wherever the wind blows. So, yes, Facebook in 2016 was talking about how you need to resist or LGBTQ pride or whatever because they thought that was what was going to make them the most money. And now that Trump won, they're doing the opposite because all they have ever cared about is money and power. And if you don't see that, you cannot honestly say that a few years ago they were completely against everything you stand for. And now all of a sudden, because they throw a couple million at Trump and he schmoozes up on them to make sure they follow his narratives, that they're on your side now. They're not. They never will be on your side. They are only on whatever side will make them the most money. Point blank. Okay. All right. Enough of the technocratic stuff. You know how you guys always complain about how Democrats are moralizing and virtue signaling? You know, you guys do that too. And honestly, in probably worse ways, it's infuriating. Really. The Republican Party has branded itself as pro life. That's a core part of its platform. And what does pro life mean exactly? Well, at its core, it means that you're anti abortion. It means that you consider all life sacred, even if it has not yet been born. That just because a baby has not been born yet doesn't mean that it has less value than a baby that is already born. So, why is it that the second a baby is born, you're okay with throwing it out on the street? It does not make any sense. If you are truly pro life and not just anti abortion, why is it that every time I hear Republicans talk about the issue, they'll go on and on about how abortion is awful, it's genocide, stuff like that. And then the second you ask them about how they can help these young parents, nothing. Healthcare is expensive. The number one reason people talk about getting an abortion, anytime there's ever been a poll for it, the number one reason is always financial insecurity. So with childbirth being expensive, with child care being expensive, with pregnancy being expensive, basically every single aspect of being a parent being incredibly expensive and getting more so. Why is it that Republicans are not talking about trying to help these young families out? In fact, the only party that is talking about universal health care, universal child care, is the party of Democrats. So, especially if you are a small c conservative, meaning that you, in your life, in your personal viewpoint, you just have a more conservative ideology, you should be all for the nuclear family, right? I mean, you should support one parent being able to work while another parent stays home and takes care of the kid and the house. But with wages stagnating so much, with unions being gutted, how is one income supposed to support an entire family? And your policies are a direct result of that. So instead of offering any kind of social solutions, increasing the social safety nets, fighting for universal basic income, fighting for universal health care, showing any kind of empathy at all, basically, you just say that people have to work harder and take responsibility for their own personal choices. But the fact is, I mean, childcare in America is ludicrously expensive. It's prohibitive. I've got some stats here. Let's break it down. If you have two kids, your average cost for daycare is $600 a week. Obviously, it's going to be more in some locations, less in others, but that's an average. If you're making minimum wage, federally mandated minimum wage in the US, and you're working 40 hours a week, full time, you're bringing home less than $300 a week. And that's before taxes. So obviously, that's just not going to work. So to make $600 a week, you have to be pulling in $15 an hour and working 40 hours a week. Except again, that's before taxes. And it doesn't include the cost of public transportation or a vehicle, gas, insurance. So realistically, just to break even, you've got to be making like 3 times minimum wage and working 40 hours a week. And that's not even to make any money. That is for the privilege of going to work for somebody and making somebody else rich while you pay somebody else to watch your kids and see them grow up. And God forbid if you have to pay for your own insurance too, because that's going to be hundreds of dollars every paycheck, and you're going to have to be making even more. So the point is, if you actually care about children, if you are actually pro life and not just anti abortion, why are you constantly complaining about any kind of welfare, about people on food stamps, about people getting any kind of government assistance, people getting Medicaid? It's like they're taking it directly out of your pocket. The fact is that social programs are a very small percentage of the US budget as a whole. Well, all right. Let me take that back, actually. That's not quite true. Look, I have looked at the analytics of my videos. I know who watches these mostly. And to be honest, a lot of you are old. And look, no hate, okay? I hope to be old one day myself. But the fact is that the largest US expenditure is on Social Security. That is a welfare program. That is a social safety net. But I'm sure you can come up with plenty of reasons why Trump better not touch your Social Security. So, why is it that your social safety net is good? Your social safety net is okay, even though it's spending so much more money than food stamps. Why is it that Social Security is so important to help people who have had their entire life to get their finances in order? But food stamps for young families, WIC for mothers who have just had babies, is such a big issue. It doesn't seem like you're really pro life at all. It seems like you really only care about yourself. I always try and sneak in a moral message into these videos, right? And look, I am not any kind of moral authority myself. I'm just some guy. But Republicans always claim to be the Christian party. And you know who is a moral authority? That Jesus guy. And I am positive that probably 90% of you have heard this verse here. Jesus said, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of our world. For when I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Hmm. So, first of all, that sort of flips your whole party's ethos on its head, right? I mean, you cannot say that you are a Christian party and also be fighting against social programs. You cannot say you are living the kind of life that Jesus would want you to live while you are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that poor people are not taken care of. And that, by the way, is not just limited to the US. I think we can all agree that programs like USAID had a lot of fluff. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on things that frankly didn't matter. I mean, I think we can probably all agree that we don't need to be spending $50 million on foreign operas. But the fact is that US aid also fights against hunger and poverty worldwide. So if you are serious about this whole Jesus thing, I don't know how you can possibly support tearing down a program that will save millions of people from hunger every year. And hey, here's another little fun fact I learned recently. I actually didn't know this at all. Um, you guys remember Sodom, right? The city of Sodom, as in Sodom and Gomorrah, as in got destroyed by God from like flaming meteorites, Lady Look Back, Pillar of Salt, the whole 9 yards, right? So they did some bad stuff. I'm not really going to go into it. It's weird. You can look up the story. But the prophet Ezekiel described their issue like this. Now, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy, and for that they were destroyed. Is that ringing any bells? An overfed country that does not help the poor or the needy, that is not concerned with these issues? I find that really, really interesting. So, as Musk, an unelected oligarch, runs rampant through the government, illegally shutting down anything he doesn't agree with, unilaterally pulling U.S. aid for the poor and needy, really consider if this is how you want things to go down. Sodom was not destroyed because of, ironically, sodomy. It was not destroyed because of LGBTQ rights. It was destroyed because they were unconcerned about the poor and needy. They turned their back on the people who needed them most. So, really, really consider, are you actually pro life? And if you are, what does that mean for you? How do you need to change your way of thinking? Do you need to be a little more compassionate? A strong criticism of the original Trump administration was that the cruelty was the point. And I'm not going to lie, it's really hard to argue against that right now. When programs are unilaterally, illegally shut down that are there to help people, when you see people clamoring about food stamps or welfare, not caring at all about tax breaks for billionaires, it's really hard to argue that cruelty is not the point in all of this. If you consider yourself a Christian, if you consider yourself a morally upstanding person, I want you to do a little introspection and think very hard if Jesus would really be a member of your party. There is plenty more I can complain about. And I promise you, over the next few weeks, as more breaking news happens, I'm going to be here calling out corruption, calling out illegal activity. But I hope that this finally may have been the official purge that I needed. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to me, for giving me a shot at changing your mind. Check out the description below for a link to the Discord. If you want to be a part of the community, that would be awesome. I would love to have you. I've got links to my social media below as well. You can check out my TikTok, leave me a heart, do a little TikTok dance with me. Uh, I'm just kidding. I don't do dances. Please, please do leave a comment below whether you agree or disagree or just want to add some nuance. I appreciate the engagement. It really helps. And I guess most importantly, don't forget, when you change your perspective, the reality changes. I'll see you next week.